Good morning, everyone. I am Jane Joseph, the Digital and Community Engagement Manager at Innovation Works. It is so nice for you to join us this morning. Thank you. We look forward to connecting with everyone in the startup community soon. Welcome to this month's Cafe IW on Greenwood Week. Just one of the part of the services and programming brought to life by the team at Greenwood Plan. We have the two founders here to share information on the upcoming conference for Black entrepreneurs, Samantha Black and Khamil Bailey. They'll be talking more about the conference that empowers Black entrepreneurs through information sharing, making connections, and other opportunities to grow. I'll be moderating today, and I am excited to get going with the content, questions, and answers. But before we get into our panel discussion, there are a number of people on the call who are new to Cafe IW and may not know about Innovation Works. So here's the rundown. Innovation Works provides the critical resources that Pittsburgh's technology-based startups need to reach the next stage of growth. Whether the innovations are in software, hardware, or life sciences, IW supports a diverse group of founders from various disciplines, backgrounds, and stages of early development. Our resources include seed funding, personalized mentoring, and connections to potential customers, investors, and talent. You might have heard of some of our signature programs, Alpha Lab Gear, and now Alpha Lab Help. Those programs fit with Innovation Works Seed Fund to create a continuous flow of funding, expertise, and network of entrepreneurs that we need to grow here in Pittsburgh. So today's Cafe IW program is one of our many types of programming that reach into the community and engage more people in entrepreneurship, company growth, and building expertise that you can use to improve your business today. We are extremely grateful to have some important supporters in this work. Our sponsors make so much of Innovation Works programming and resources available. So a special thank you to Buchanan, Ingersoll, and Rooney, providing expert legal advice to companies at every stage of growth. Catalyst Connection, the region's go-to for help on manufacturing issues and the unique needs of manufacturers. Sister Sin & Co., they provide expert accounting advice, including many of the startups in our IW portfolio. And we can't thank these supporters enough for their ongoing support. All right, with that started, let's begin with our speakers. First of all, can you both tell me a little bit more about yourselves, starting with Samantha?
Oh, okay. That was a great introduction.
It really was.
That was very good.
Thank you.
My name is Samantha Black. I am the CEO of Sila PGH. What I do is consulting on socioeconomic issues as it relates to arts and culture within the Pittsburgh region.
Fantastic. All right, and Khamil?
I'm a Black business advocate, founder of Cocopreneur PGH, director of Cocopreneur PGH. Sam didn't mention her other title with Greenwood, but we're also co-founders of the Greenwood Plan. It's new, so but yeah, that's kind of what we do, just advocating for the needs of the Black business community, not just economically, but also personally and I guess holistically. So an advocate in that way.
And you are both founders of the Greenwood Plan. Samantha, you are the executive director.
Mm-hmm.
And Khamil, you are the chief financial officer.
Correct.
Absolutely, great. So talking about your experiences individually as entrepreneurs and how you were going through Pittsburgh, let's talk about that moment that both of you met and how all of this really got started.
There are varying accounts, right? Because we can't agree on one. Khamil said we met somewhere else, but I'm pretty sure that we met, we had a meeting. So I had met her through, I think it was just a various different networks.
Mm-hmm.
You know how in Pittsburgh, you see somebody and you're like, I know that person, but you don't necessarily know that person.
Yeah.
And then I found out that she was doing the Black Business Directory, which was something that everybody was always talking about, but nobody actually ever did. Well, not nobody, right? But nobody was actually currently doing. So there was this transition period in which the old organizations had a Black Business Directory, and Khamil was like, trying to do a new one. And so I was just like, what do you need help with? How can we get this off the ground? And so we met at Harris Grill, I believe, down the street. And we were discussing, basically how stressful it was to be Black entrepreneur woman parent in Pittsburgh, right? Like that's a lot of demographics for the city to cover, and there was no coverage. We did not know who to go to, who to talk to. Nobody was pointedly doing the work of, I guess, handling those demographics, right? Like handling those demographics appropriately, accurately, and with respect. And so we were just like, okay, well, we know people who are experts in these fields that we need, right? Like the MWDBE or the marketing or something like that. So it was just, we know all of the individuals and entities that were doing the work, and they were Black. And so we were just like, okay, let's just hire them. And that's pretty much what we did. We just hired our peers to teach us how to be better business people, business women, business, okay. Business folks.
Right.
That's
So how did that spring into becoming the Greenwood Week?
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't happen right away at that meeting, but it was a very organic moment where we decided that we should put together these experts to bring in front of other folks. So we really thought about the things that we needed as the launching pad for the classes we would curate. So understanding that we needed marketing and branding, we needed to make sure that our businesses were registered correctly, right? That started the initial classes that we put together at the Cohen and Grigsby office down here downtown. And we had a room, I think it was 25 people for 4 different classes in the fall of 2018. And they all sold out, and people also mentioned that they wish that they could have invited other people, or they wish they had a babysitter, or, so from those 4 events, we decided to do a week-long conference the following year. So that next fall was the first Greenwood Week conference, a week-long, 10 classes. We provided childcare, we fed folks, we made sure that families had flexible seating. So if an entire family was there, they could sit. And this was at Innovation Works. So thank you, Innovation Works, for believing in the first conference that we did and supporting it, because it absolutely contributed to the overall effectiveness of bringing dignity back to the work that we're doing, because a lot of folks don't feel that. So the inception of Greenwood Week started as Samantha and I putting together classes that we wanted to see for ourselves, making sure other people had access to the information. And then once folks gave us feedback to say, we want more, we did more. And it kind of was that simple.
Now, talking about people giving you that positive feedback and wanting more, how were you able to expand the Greenwood Week into the Greenwood Plan and give that 360 all year experience?
So this is a philanthropic town, and organizations don't necessarily fund LLCs, right? Like, and so we had a very hard conversation about the transitional piece that we needed to do, not only as individuals, but also organization-wise, right? Like, so we were an LLC Greenwood Week. We only did it once a year. We had our respective businesses, but then we got feedback like, hey, you have to be a nonprofit or we can't give you, the large sums of money that you're requesting to do this work. And so we were just like, okay, I think we went back and forth for like months, right? Like months, because there are values that we kind of hold near and dear to us. And one of the things that we noticed was that there is kind of like this trap in Pittsburgh that silos Black organizations into nonprofits, and then they become dependent upon the philanthropic arm that gatekeeps the work that we all do, right? Like, and so a lot of people are pigeonholed into, I need to serve my community. They have the idea that they want to serve their community, and the only way that they could do that is through nonprofit work. And then they become dependent upon the funds of all these different organizations, right? Like, so we were battling because we preach that, right? Like, we're just like, it's not always, you don't always have to be a nonprofit to get the work done. But then we ended up being a nonprofit to get the work done, right? Like we had to take what I, consider is like this kind of L in our values. We kind of had to do this work to ensure that the people that we were bringing behind us didn't have to do that, right? Like that they don't have to run through hoops, find a fiscal sponsor, do all that work to be able to get $5,000, right? Like that little sum of money. So we were just like, listen, we have hundreds of Black people behind us, and we just have to do this. Like it was hard. We just had to do it.
It was an L to the ego, but a win for the work that we want to do. So while individually, personally, we didn't necessarily want to go into the nonprofit space, because of who we aim to serve and what we want to do, it just made sense to do it. So I'm not gonna call it an L. I refuse. So we had to do that in order to do the work that we wanted to do at the level we wanted to do it and at the speed that we wanted to do it. So
let's not call it an L, let's call it a sacrifice.
That works.
Better
Okay.
work.
I like that.
Compromise.
So after making that conscious sacrifice and being able to take yourself to the next level, are there services or programming that you were able to expand from becoming the Greenwood Plan?
Yeah, as I said, the conference is only a week long, but now, like we're able to do things whenever we want to, right? Like, because we have not only do we get larger sums of money, right? Like, because we're a nonprofit, but we also have staff to be able to do so. So if a lot of organizations can't necessarily fund events, but they can fund programming around missions and goals and things like that. So that kind of expanded not only our reach, but our network and, our ability to be able to serve demographics that we weren't able to serve before, right? Like, so second chance citizens or youth, right? Like we couldn't do that necessarily in the conference because there were a lot of constraints, not only with spaces, but our finances. So now we have the ability to holistically serve our communities.
Right. And the thing about the programming that we have really brainstormed heavily on is that it does not have to fit into that cookie cutter mold of business support. Because of what Sam does and kind of getting people used to the idea that art is everywhere and art isn't everything, right? It allows us to support different types of artistic business under the umbrella of business. So supporting different types of initiatives from our peers and the things that they want to do through Greenwood. So while it's not just the same branding, marketing, it can be things like art and culture as we know it, like the very obvious definition. It can also go into tech, it can go into innovation, it can go into all those things because now we have the capacity to fit all those things under what we want to do, under the title of business, right? So I think that that's one of the things that I'm looking forward to, is seeing some of those ideas play out and being able to, I guess, provide this space for intersectional ideas, because not everything fits into one box. Some of them fit into several. So being able to do this work and provide space for especially Black entrepreneurs, creative entrepreneurs, to do that work without the constraints of finances and capacity.
Absolutely. And that segues into our next topic nicely. So why is entrepreneurship important? Why entrepreneurship to start and to make money?
I think I would rather start like the conversation historically. Why has it been important? Because, Black people are left out of resources frequently, right? Whether that is jobs, homeownership, like all of those things. And the only thing that we had was our culture, right? And with our culture stemmed, our art forms. And with those different art forms within a capitalistic society, we found a way to kind of make money off of that so that we could support our families, right? Like, so I think every Black neighborhood or every Black family knows somebody who could cook, like just very well, right? And so people, they sell plates, or people, they repair shoes, or make leather goods, furriers, like all of those things. There have been countless art forms that have been capitalized on in the Black community. And I think entrepreneurship was the only way that we could ensure that we participate in a system that didn't want us to participate, right? Like there were a lot of methods and a lot of channels in which we could, kind of gain money for the benefit of building wealth, where we were, strategically left out of. And I think that is currently entrepreneurship has been a little bit gentrified, right? Because when you think of entrepreneurship in America, you do not think of barbers, right? You never think of barbers, you never think of cosmetologists or anything like that, right? Like you always think of like this techie kind of like co-working space type of thing.
Venture capital.
Venture capital, like all of those things. And I think Black people have laid the foundation for what entrepreneurship looks like in America, and we never get the credit for that, right? And whenever you tell, it's so ingrained that we don't do entrepreneurship, that if you tell a Black person who is a barber that, you know, they're an entrepreneur, they're like, no, I'm not, you know, I work as a barber.
Right.
It's like, no, you actually, like, you are your own boss, like you are your own, and the things that go along with being, I guess, sustainably wealthy, right? Like there's no health insurance, there's nothing like surrounding that, but the innovation for entrepreneurship, right? Like for how we pay people or how they work together, it all came from Black communities before. And so the historical aspect of entrepreneurship, it does belong to Black people. And that's why it's always been important, because, you know, what else did we have?
I mean, and entrepreneurship at its core is solution-based, which is what Black folks had to do, create solutions out of inherent problems that existed in this country for Black folks. Like even once slavery was abolished in this country, if people didn't want to go back into work for the same folks that they had just been released from, they had to go into business for themselves, otherwise be subjected to the same things. Also, we see that in this country, when Black communities have had the most sustainability for their communities, it's been through entrepreneurship and economics and cooperative economics, which is different from what we see. And like America is very individualistic. We preach individualism heavily. Black folks practice cooperative economics and become more sustainable in their neighborhoods and in their ecosystems. And honestly, this goes even before we talk about post-transatlantic slave trade. You know, this is back to Africa and cooperative economic systems. Like when we talk about entrepreneurship, when we talk about economics, capitalism is one type of system, but the cooperative economic system has sustained communities much better. And these are practices that folks, they were merchants, they were traders, they bartered. These are all economic systems that are totally sustainable, but they just don't fit the mold in America. However, when you find that communities can more or less order themselves off and create their own systems, they tend to thrive under that cooperative system. So Black folks have practiced that for a long time. Black folks still practice that. And again, we talk about, when we think about last year in 2020, and we think about how COVID shut everything down, the cooperative model is what saved us. And I think that folks can learn a lot from communities who have to practice cooperative economics, like Black communities, about what it means to be human beings serving other human beings, and innovating and solving problems and being entrepreneurs.
And I just want to point out, like, the sustainability portion is very important, right? Like in a day and age, or just in a system where like businesses don't last that long, right? Like they just don't. They get a lot of capital and then they, you know, fizzle out by the end. But in Black communities, you can always, you know, like you don't even need a directory. You ask somebody and be like, yeah, Mr. James has been doing this for, you know, 30 plus years. Or even if you look at jitney drivers, right? Like jitney drivers were the taxi men, right?
Like Uber before
they were
Uber.
Uber before Uber. And I think that is very important to note, that we had the innovation to be able to sustain those businesses for years, and the lack of sustainability only came with government interference, right? So a lot of Black people are unable to pay the certification fees, or they're unable to pass you know, the type of tests that you have to go through, inspections, things like that. So with government interference, like whenever we talk about you know, how the government is kind of harder on Black communities, right? It is because they have this standard that is not specifically for Black communities. Again, inspections, certifications, like all of those things that you have to go through, the testing in a city like Pittsburgh, where it's like geographically segregated, socially segregated, like all of these things, I don't have the access to be able to transport myself to like the testing site or to the inspector, or the inspector doesn't come to my neighborhood, right? Like we have a lot of those barriers happening, and decimated, right? Like it completely decimated our ideals around entrepreneurship or our innovation around entrepreneurship.
That makes me think about the philanthropic community too, though. Like the same way that the government, it gives you a certain amount of support or resources, but it limits how far you can go in them. It reminds me of the philanthropic community as well. It's very similar.
Absolutely. You know, we talk about entrepreneurship, and I think something that you've both brought up to me that really creates my thinking of what it means to support an entrepreneur is the cultural support. So why is culture important in the trajectory of the socioeconomic regional growth? Why is culture something that we should be talking about, thinking about, living about more?
I think a better question is, why was it excluded in the first place? Because it has defined pieces of our lives up until this point, right? Like, so people like to, especially with the arts, and I tell people this all the time, that the current arts community in Pittsburgh has removed culture, effectively removed culture, right? So much so that people are unable to do anything without a flyer or do anything unplanned or do anything, right? Like, it's like, if you do something without a flyer, nobody's going to be there, or like you always want somebody to know that you did this thing. And it's kind of like this trap. Like, I need to create portfolio items so that they can see that I did this work, so that I could get funding to continue to do this work, right? Like, that's the philanthropic gatekeeping that happens within the I guess the arts and culture scene, right? And so whenever we do this work, I am an artist. I see art in every single aspect. I think that business without art is failure, right? Like, there is no business, there is no industry in which art does not have a place, right? Like, even if we're talking about war, right? Like, when we're talking about war, people design missiles. Like, there is if we're talking about development, right? There is an architect that is designing that building. There is somebody always designing, creating. And the fact that we kind of trap people into this thought process that art is not important, right? People are convinced that they're not even artists. People are convinced that they do not create, or they are not creative, simply because, and I think I told you this before, your proximity to making money for war makes you less of an artist, right? Like, so they'll remove the title the more beneficial you are to the system. And I think that's kind of a detriment, because a painter is just as important, right? Like, I think that painters, singers, musicians, performers, like all of these people that get sidetracked or do not get the opportunities and access to grants are just as important as the people that you think are beneficial to you, like social media folks or people who design flyers, things like that. They are equally beneficial, but because we don't see their value, their monetary value, right? Because we all have to make money. We don't see their monetary value in our companies. We throw them to the wayside and say, hey, this is where you can go to do your thing, right? Like, not over here though, right? And I think in Pittsburgh itself, we have siloed the arts into just singular places. Like, where can I go to watch a play, right? You can name about three places, right? But there are other places to catch a play, right? Like, there are people on the streets that are doing plays, or there are people in their backyards that are doing play. August Wilson House, right? Like, there's a lot of art in places that is uncurated, and we don't think it's art anymore, because we have designated that this is where you need to go to do art and nowhere else. So if you don't do it here, you are not an artist. Sorry, that was a long answer.
Well, and I think it also speaks to the geographic aspect of Pittsburgh too. I know I love art, I love theater and culture, but I limit myself to the areas I'm comfortable going in, right? That I go in regularly. So I think it also speaks to getting out of your comfort zone and exploring more of the city that way. We'll have a future conversation on the intersection of art and innovation coming up. Please look for that announcement as well. Shameless plug for us in the future. So, you know, we talk about serving our entrepreneurs in these cultural curation spheres. What does it look like when we serve entrepreneurs with their cultural curation spheres? How does that look like in the future? What is the benefit there?
That's me. Okay. What does it look like to support entrepreneurs? And this is from a cultural standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that, and this kind of goes back into the last question, but a lot of what folks, I think what people pay for a lot of the time when they talk about Any business, even when you talk about tech, is design, right? And even the user experience, user interfaces, I think those are all things that go into supporting someone's culture. And this is not just by race. This is by, I mean, think about Pittsburgh. Each neighborhood in Pittsburgh has its own culture, right?
Absolutely.
So depending on what a group of people agree on as culture, when you can speak directly to that, you can provide a service, a product, a business that is so tailor-made to people that it feels ingrained in them, that they have to use, that it feels like something that they have to do. So when you support culture in innovation, when you support culture in business, what you're really supporting is giving somebody ideal services, like the best possible outcome that they could have for their needs come through incorporating culture into these products and services. Does that answer the question? Does that make sense? Okay.
Absolutely.
I want to make sure that makes sense. But I think that that's what we have to pay attention to when we're supporting the cultural part of entrepreneurship. It's not just the things that make it look pretty or make it go. The aesthetic matters. The aesthetic matters on how it makes people feel when they receive it. So I think it's important that when you're supporting entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs, any type of innovation and growth, the cultural piece has to be important. I think we also see, especially in tech, that when you don't have enough culture in decision-making, it could literally be life or death.
Right.
Like when we think about autonomous vehicles, like we all know about the reports of the autonomous vehicles not recognizing dark bodies. That's life or death, right? So when you don't have culture, when you don't have variations of life, like how people live, it could mean life or death, or just the failure of your concept. So
I also remember you guys did, I think this was before the shutdown, there was a Cafe IW around racism and AI. And I think that was the first time I ever heard the concept, right? Like I understood the concept, but that was the first time I heard it. And then it kind of, solidified all the things that like we were actively doing. I think this was before we did like Greenwood Plan or after, I'm not sure. It was in the beginning, but it was just like, because it was a reaffirmation of like, knowing that you have to inject culture, like you just have to, right? Computers are not going to be able to do anything that humans are unable to do, right? And so whenever you design a computer and the person themselves are racist, it's going to be racist, right? Like if you design work or whatever you design is going to mimic the human being that is behind it, right? And so whenever you think of the Greenwood Plan, right, like it is literally mimicking our behaviors, like it's literally mimicking, all the things that we embody, our values, things like that. So like the culture piece very much is at the forefront, because we know that any system designed with, I guess, capitalism or whatever overarching entity that you believe in, whether that is capitalism, whether that is white supremacy, whatever the oppressive force is, if you mimic that force, it is going to be that force, right? Like, and we don't want to utilize that lens to design anything, because that just creates harm. And we see a lot of the programs around the city that, try to mimic capitalism. They try to mimic government. They try to mimic all of these things that have been historically oppressive to Black people. And they're just like, well, I don't know why nobody came. Well, I mean, you didn't even put it in the right neighborhood, right? Like not even understanding the transportation issue that happens in Pittsburgh. You had it in the wrong neighborhood, or you didn't do the demographic work to understand that you should have put the flyers in the library versus, this other building that you did. Whenever you are doing programming based on ego or based on all these entities, like all these oppressive entities, it's never going to serve anyone. And people give up so easily when it comes to Black people, right? They're just like, well, this program didn't work for a year. We've done a lot of things.
Right? I tried.
It's along the lines of like poor people need to accept whatever I give them because they are poor. And that's just not how we work, right? Like we work with culture first. Money is like behind us, right? Like, or financial capacity is behind us, because we understand that that is not even just a good, you're not a good person when you do that, right? Like it's not even just about the programming. Not only is your programming going to be just far removed from the people that you're serving, but like I don't think you should feel good trying to pass off things to people that you think are in need and giving them bare minimum, right? Like bare minimum effort. Like we just don't do bare minimum effort, because I think that Black people deserve better, right? Like that's the culture in our work, that Black people deserve better.
And you said something about like when people build systems or build organizations, it mimics the person. The thing about what we do is that we build everything with other people. So when we create things, it is because someone asked for that thing. Like we mimic people because everything that we do involves other people. Even when we have people curate classes, it's like, okay, what is your area of expertise? You tell me what it is that you want to bring to this conversation, because you are the expert.
Yes.
Right. So I'm not going to dictate to you what it is. I'm not going to give you bullet points. I want you to make sure that you cover these things and do these things. I'm going to ask you as the expert in your field, what do you feel is pertinent information that folks should know based on your experience, based on all the years and time that you've put into this? What is it that we should know from you?
Right.
And that's how we design everything. I think that's why people are so receptive to what we do, because we literally ask people what they want and then deliver it as what they ask.
Absolutely. Well, I know I asked you both for an honest conversation today, and you're definitely delivering on that. So I do want to thank you. I do want to turn it over to Jordan. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes. So Susan Cohen asked a multi-part question, so I'll start with that.
Okay.
How would you characterize the state of Pittsburgh's entrepreneurial system as a whole in terms of its engagement and support for racial and ethnic minorities?
Lacking. That's what I have.
Yeah, I don't think we do a good job, right? Like and this is not, I love Pittsburgh. One, we all love Pittsburgh. We could move, right? Like we could absolutely move. Yeah. Like there is not much here that can hold us, right? And the fact that we are here speaks to our dedication to do this work. And it's not that Pittsburgh is, as a city, is failing Black people. There's just no focus. And we have to frequently have this conversation about why we do programming for Black people. It's because there's nothing else, right? Like, and I know that sounds like an over exaggeration, but there is nothing else. Like if you read any of the reports that go out, right? Like this is the worst city for Black women. The mortality rate for infants and is it mothers? Yeah, it's high, right? Like even if you read the banking reports, right, from 2007 to like 2019, I think it was like maybe 5% of loans went to Black communities, not even Black people, Black communities. The majority of Black communities in Pittsburgh are living in or next to abject poverty, right? Like there's no middle class Black neighborhood, right? And that's an arguable point, but there's actually no middle class Black neighborhood. Even if you look at like the GPAC reports about the philanthropic community funding Black communities, over 80-something% of monies, billions of dollars, went into the hands of white organizations, right? And then the rest went to Alana groups. That's not even just Black people. That's, you know, like Asian American, Latin American, Native American groups, right? Like African American groups as well. It's like there is nothing here. Like if I had to list all the Black bars to go to, it's on one hand. Well, maybe two hands, right? Like nobody is creating things for Black people specifically, not even individuals, but on a cultural basis. There is no place that we can go to be comfortable. And whenever you think about, hey, what can I do tonight, right? Like for other groups, it's just like, yes, I have a plethora of things, right? Little Italy, Picklesburg, like I could go to a game, like I could do all of these things. And it's not that Black people cannot do these things, but the global majority is now the local minority. And that's just not okay, right? Like if we are to be a city city supporting the arts, every other art city has a larger, larger demographic of businesses, programming, supporting their Black communities. And that's the detriment of Pittsburgh. It's that we don't allow Black people to be Black because we're just like, oh yeah, no, we're diverse. We're not. We're absolutely not. You focus on diversity before you focus on the entity that you needed for diversity. And that's the issue, right? Like you need Black people more than Black people need you. And the way that the city maneuvers, it has pushed our Black population to the outskirts, right? It has pushed us basically into the hands of other cities or other entities or other, like we just do not, we refuse to say the word Black. Like if you go to any type of event focusing on DEI initiatives or anything like that, right? You can probably count on one hand how many times they say Black, right? Like you can absolutely do that. And that is to our detriment. Like it's not even about exclusionary practices, it's about focus. And there is a lack of focus on Black people, Black culture, support for Black organizations, Black businesses, all of those things. Like we just do not do a good job of that as a port town specifically.
And I think that with the entrepreneurial ecosystem, when I say it's lacking, I think it's lazy. And I think that what happens is the intent is to get people to assimilate to the overall culture instead of actually allowing for diversity. So there is no diversity, there is no innovation, because everything is being aimed toward assimilating to the culture that exists currently, but people don't fit that culture, right? So I think that's part of the issue as well. There's no room for people to be who or what they are.
Thank you. Was there a second part to that question?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, we're really getting started here.
You talked about some of the areas that there were gaps in the entrepreneurial system. What do you think Pittsburgh can do as a whole to correct these?
A lot. I think it's like based on, did you want to answer? Okay, right. So I think it's based on your industry, right? Like there are a lot of tangible things that you could do. Like, I mention to organizations all the time, they're like, how can we help you? Just share a flyer, right? Like if there is somebody doing something, maybe give them event space, right? Like increase the grants, right? Like at every level that you are as a business, as an organization, there is something that you could do that does not cost you, right? Sometimes it's just stepping back. Sometimes it's like, hey, we have this space. Would you like to use it? Yes. Okay, do your thing, right? Like these are the things that you can't do, but we will not touch that, right? Like it's giving autonomy to Black businesses, Black individuals, Black organizations to be able to do the work that they do because we already do this work, right? Like there is a thing in Pittsburgh where there's like, we're not doing enough. It's not we, right? Like it's not a we thing. Black communities are still doing the work, boots on the ground. Like they are absolutely doing political work. They are doing civic work. They are doing all of the work that Pittsburgh wants to be doing, right? And then Pittsburgh is just like, oh, well, how, where do we go? Like, what do we do? It's like, all you have to do is,
how do we create this thing when the thing already exists? So I had to interject that real quick because that happens. How do we create this system? How do we create this programming? You don't have to do that because it literally exists.
And not even to plug us, that's what we do, right? Like at the Greenwood Plan, we are not meant to do any type of new program.
Don't want to.
Do not do. I don't want to, right? Like I do not want to do half the work that all of these Black folks are already doing, right? Because they're already doing it. What I'm here to do is provide you the platform, provide you the network, provide you the resources. Like if you're just like, I need space to be able to do this, right? Okay, how can we get you space? What neighborhood would you like to go in? We know people in those neighborhoods. Let's partner with this organization right here. And then it's also telling those organizations like, hey, you do not have the bandwidth to do what this person is doing. So you need to respect their work. You need to step back a little bit. You need to take your hands off of whatever it is that they're doing and just be an ally, right? And that word gets thrown around so much, but people do not know how to be allies. An ally is not somebody who leads with ego, right? Like I am not in several communities, right? Like, but I know how to be an ally to them without being present. There are a lot of things that we have done individually and organizationally that you will never hear about because that's not the purpose of the Greenwood Plan, right? We do not, and we have a hard time doing this, right? Like collecting data. Our data collection is subpar, right? Like it's absolutely subpar because we don't need to prove ourselves. Like, right, we don't need to continuously prove ourselves that we actually do this work. And whenever, like again, the portfolio items are so important to the philanthropic community that people are doing work and they're just like, I need to prove that I did this. Right. So they're always taking pictures or they're always taking selfies with like the right people, or they're always like, well, this is what we did right here. Right. Like they're always gassing themselves up, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, you overshadow the people that you did the work for in the first place. So now there's no point to the work, right? Like now there's no point because they were supposed to be highlighted. They were supposed to be respected. Like you didn't give them any type of dignity whatsoever. You just made it about your organization, right? Like I think Pittsburgh is very ego-based, and that's not how you get the work done at all.
That's a good point.
Okay. Another question.
So, you coming up the first week in October, correct?
Yes.
And we discussed how your programs are based on feedback that you receive. So can you just go into a little bit about the topics you'll be covering throughout the week?
Great question.
Okay. So we have every conference, we have about 10 events. We have this year copywriting, trademarking. We have home office organization. We have a minor accounting class. And these are all with Black entrepreneurs and or organizations. And we pay all the tutors unless their organization dictates that they don't. But we do, I think we have an MWDBE class as well, which is the Minority Women Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Application process. We did find that the majority of wealthy businesses Black businesses in America, that is the dividing point, is that they did the certification to be able to handle government contracts and things like that. We have a plethora of classes. I can't name all 10 of them, but you get the direction.
But one you did name, and I think this speaks to what we do in regard to responding, right, is that home office organization. That's not something that we thought to cover in the past couple of years because it was not prevalent at the time. 2020 showed us that people may be working from home. So now we need to ask, what do people need to be successful? What do people need? And when I say successful, I mean comfortable, happy in the work that they do. That might be home office organization. How do you separate your laundry room from your office so that while you're working, you're not also trying to do laundry and cook dinner? So what are the pertinent issues, topics, I guess, pain points that people have, and then deliver on those things. And these are things that people ask for, things that people may have complained about. We're in network with all people we serve, either through social media or personal relationships. So when we hear people complain about what's not working for them, those are the types of things that we like to put in place for our conferences.
Innovation.
See? Yeah, there we go.
Always pivoting.
Always gonna use that word.
And we'll share on social later today where you can go to sign up for the Greenwood conference, first week of October, which is coming up very quickly.
Yes,
I think it's like 8 days or something.
Yeah. All right, and do we have any other questions, Jordan?
Yes, so we have a question about what the Greenwood Plan's biggest needs are right now, and what's the best way for people and companies who want to work with you, how do they get connected with you?
You can connect with us via email, but I think our major needs, right? The point of the Greenwood Plan is to redirect resources because there's a lot of resources in our region, right? And every time I mention this, like nobody believes me, but like if you look at the Hill District, if you look at East Liberty, well, not East Liberty now, but East Liberty before, we have so many neighborhoods that are moving billions of dollars on a daily basis surrounding us, right? Like every Black neighborhood has resources adjacent to it, and it's never just like, hey, let me just put some resources over here, because there's always like, well, I don't trust poor people with money, or I don't trust Black people with money, right? When I think poor people do a great job of handling money. What you can do with the Greenwood Plan is trust us, right? Like that's the first step. You have to trust that we do the work that we say we're going to do, that we are actively beneficial to the Black communities in Pittsburgh, and then give us some money, right? And then give us some money so that we can hire the organizations, hire the individuals that are going to be, again, I don't want to do this work, right? Like I don't want to teach a class. I don't want to do any of that, but there are people that is their passion, right? Like my passion is advocacy. It is not teaching. And whenever those people come to partner with us because we're comfortable, right? Like we're comfortable people, we're a comfortable organization, we're boots on the ground, right? Like we're just regular, Pittsburghers.
I'm not a Pittsburgher.
I'm
yes.
sorry.
No, I'm
okay. We have a varying network of people that could use your resources, and whatever resources that you dictate that you are able to give, you could give it to us and we will find somebody who is in need of that, right? Like, again, it's something so simple as sharing like an e-blast, or it's something so simple as giving us a platform on, the podcast, right? Like, it's just different. It's what you think that you can give. We can find something to do with it, right? Like it's completely up to you what you have to give, and then trust us to be able to give it to the people that are in need and or require that resource.
Right. There's this concept of you don't know what you don't know, and sometimes we don't know what you have to offer, and sometimes our networks don't know that they could have used a thing that exists. So if we present it to them, it's like, oh, I can fit that into what I do. That helps me in this way. So same way we do with the people who we partner with, you let us know what your area of expertise is, and we'll let you know how we can fit that into our programming. And I'm sure that there is a way to fit all those things in.
Because that's our job. We're the curators, right? Like we curate all the moving pieces, right? Like the trying to connect or communicate between organizations and individuals. That's our work, right? Like, again, we're not teachers. Like, we're not doing any of that thing. We're simply making the necessary connections for the benefit, for the economic benefit of our region. Oh, you could also buy tickets for
other people if you want. If you know people, right, if you know people who you think this could benefit, you could always purchase a ticket for them. That's always a thing that could happen. But yeah, I think we use money well. So I think we've been pretty good at applying resources. And this is so funny because we talked about this before, right? This concept of Black folks, poor folks knowing how to stretch money. There's this concept of making $1 out of 15 cents, if you've never heard that. But because of the community that we've created, because we're not even created, but that we have participated in, been active members in, we generally can barter things. We can make money stretch. We shouldn't have to do that. But if we had to, like, a little money goes a long way for us. So yes.
What advice do you give young Black entrepreneurs to create generational wealth in Pittsburgh?
There's so many tools to create generational wealth. Well, first, you have to define what you think wealth is, right? Because a lot of people have varying instances of what they think success is. Like, even between myself and Khamil, I have a different level of success than probably Khamil does, right? And I think a lot of Black people are under the impression, or they have been tricked into thinking you need to make $1 million to be successful. And that's absolutely not true, right? Because money is not the only asset that is beneficial to your life. You need to decide what success looks like for you. And then there are a lot of support organizations in Pittsburgh. I will give Pittsburgh that, right? Like, I think I was talking to somebody in, maybe it was like Atlanta or something like that. And they're like, well, we don't have that, right? Like, we don't have any of the support organizations that you guys are talking about. Like, how can I find those? Pittsburgh does a good job of curating programming specifically for the support of like entrepreneurship, whether or not saying that all of them are successful or all of them are failures, but there is support out there. So I would say that Black entrepreneurs need to find out the steps, the path, and you can email me if you want to, find out the steps to get your business up and running, get your business plan, your EIN, all of those things, and then follow the organization that does that support work. So if that is the Institute for Entrepreneurial Excellence to get your business plan, if that is working on your LLC with the local state representative's office. Like, it's dependent upon which stage you're in your entrepreneurship, and you need to outline that as a Black entrepreneur in the city.
And I'm gonna give a slightly different answer. Okay, let me figure out how to say this. We are all going to die, right? So when you die, okay. The question was about generational wealth, right?
All right.
I'm just saying.
They got intense.
Just saying. So you want to think about what happens after you die with what you have, right? Do you have assets or do you have liabilities? Look into some life insurance because you are going to die. So when you think about that, think about things that you can absolutely pass on that will hold value. So that might be land or real estate. If you have a business, have a succession plan. Is succession planning one of our classes? It is.
Oh yeah, it is. We have a succession planning class.
If you are an entrepreneur, look into succession planning, make sure it's written down where your business goes, who it goes to, what it looks like when it goes over to somebody else. Those are things that you want to do to make sure that in the event that you pass on, everything is lined out so that it passes on to whoever your next of kin may be. So when you're talking about creating generational wealth, you just want to make sure that when you're gone, what you do have does go on to whoever your next of kin may be, and they're not starting from scratch. That's kind of my.
We have succession planning and wealth building.
Both. So I mean,
Both.
Yeah, when the links drop for the Greenwood Plan or for Greenwood Week, just check it out, and then you can register for classes a la carte or the entire week. So if that's just the one that you want to attend, we are covering succession planning and wealth building.
All right. Do we have any other questions, Jordan?
Yes, so we kind of talked about this a little bit, but in terms of portfolio-based support, how do you think Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh Foundation can improve their work for Black business?
Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh Foundation, or?
Let's go with Pittsburgh.
Okay.
Okay. Now this question.
Okay. It's hard, right? Like, so there's a lot of internal work that organizations need to do about we do a good job of recruiting, but not a good job of retention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so how is it that people keep falling through the cracks through these different organizations that are meant to support, right? Like, did you follow, and it's not even about holding people's hands, right? It's like, did you follow their success, right? Like, is it personal to you, right? Like, is their work personal to you? How do you as an organization, and I know there's a lot of people that apply, I know there's a lot of people that, you know, want support, but again, you don't have to do this work by yourself, Pittsburgh Foundation, right? Like, there are a lot of different organizations that you could literally just hand the money to, Greenwood Plan. But there are a lot of different organizations that you can hand the money to, right? Like, we try to make sure that we acquire the interests of other organizations and entities, right? Because their success means our success. And whenever we acquire them, it's not even on a financial basis, it's more so on a mission basis, right? Like, how's your business doing, right? Like, how's your company doing? Like, how, you know, like, are you coming to our event? You know, like, what's going on with you? It's being more personable. It's treating people like human beings. And it's hard to do so in this system that we're in. Again, whichever oppressive overarching entity that you believe in, white supremacy, capitalism, whichever one that you believe in, right? It does not factor in humanity, right? And so you have to look at things from a different lens. And I know this is not like a specific answer, and you feel free to meet with us, but I think that we are lacking humanity and we don't respect people who are doing worse than us, right? Like, whenever you even discuss people that you are serving, people talk about them in statistical methods instead of talking about them on a human level. Like, do you know their name? Right? Like, do you know what it is that they do? It's hard to chronicle all of those things, but if you have enough staff to be able to keep all that information that, you know, like, you know what this person is doing, or you know of this person, or like, you know, like, it's injecting humanity and a bit of culture into the way that you interact with these different people. And again, this is not like a tangible answer, and feel free to meet with us to expound on it, but it's lacking humanity. And specifically myself as an artist, people don't treat artists like human beings, especially when we go to apply for grants, especially when we go to apply for $5,000. I'm never applying to a $5,000 grant again, right? Like, because the requirement is such that you need to look good on paper. I've never looked good on paper, right? For $5,000, I've never looked good on paper. You know, when we gave out $500 grants and the only requirement that we had was name, email, what you're gonna do with the money, right? And that was it. And we just gave out $500. People were just like, well, like, where's the data that you collected? We didn't need to collect data, right? Like that wasn't COVID. The pandemic is still happening. And so when we handed out $25,000 of our funding, it was just like, why did you do that? Like, it looked crazy to other people, but that it was not crazy, it was merely human. And I think being human is now looked at as like, oh, well, you're doing it completely wrong because, you know, people are going to ask you. I don't need to prove that to you, right? Like, I don't think I need to prove that to you. And so whenever you do your programming or your funding or any type of processes within your organization, just think about, are you doing it for yourself? Or are you doing it for those people? And sometimes you're going to have to like not adhere to your own standards. Also, hold my hand, because I don't always know what you want.
This is live. So.
Listen. I don't always know what you want. So if you want certain things as feedback for grant funds, that you let me know what you need and how to fill that out. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how to fill these forms out. Again, if you're an artist and you're used to creating in abstract ways, sitting down and filling out a grant or even filling out the report back is going to feel like torture, unless maybe you're a writer. But it's just, let people know what you want, and if you have to hold their hand, then do that. If that's really what you want as the end result, if you really want to serve them and you really want to get, then hold their hand. If you have the capacity. I was gonna say, if you have capacity to do that, that's what people also need.
So we're getting a lot more questions for coming up on time here. I don't know if you
Okay.
want to answer one more quickly, or
Let's take one more. We will have future programming with the Greenwood Plan, so do not fear. We will be returning. And also, for more information, you can visit their website and join them at their conference. We will learn a lot more. So let's take one more question.
okay, this one goes to in terms of, you know, COVID, working from home and work-life balance. How can we normalize healthy habits among the Black entrepreneurial community?
Rest when you need to rest. That is physically, that is mentally. Rest. I want to go take a nap right now, but like, I might do that. I think that's what needs to happen. I do not overwork yourself. Do not run yourself into the ground for organizations and companies that will replace you tomorrow if you drop dead. I keep talking about death in this, and that feels
No, it's fun.
But
we're all gonna die.
That you might conserve some years on your life if you're not stressing about, you know, how to make deadlines. Let the deadline fall by the wayside. It's okay. I mean, let me not say that, people might get fired. But if that's the case, something better will come. And align yourself with organizations and companies that speak to how you operate as a person, which I think is very important. Something that, and this is something that we've been able to do because of entrepreneurship, but I also think that a lot of companies and organizations are applying these principles as well, but allowing flexibility so that people can be the best versions of themselves. If I don't operate well at 8 a.m., how does it serve me to get up at 8 a.m. to come to your job? I'm going to be cranky. I'm not going to be productive, right? Allow me space to work in environments that make me more productive, where I'm happy to work, where the endorphins that run through me fuel me to do the work that I do. Try to align yourself with businesses, organizations, companies, even the work that you do for yourself. Try to align with the things that speak to you as a person and the things that kind of fuel you to go.
I don't like that question. And this is along the lines of like, people don't even realize what they don't realize. Health is a privilege, right? Especially in this day and age, this system, right? Like I just can't just be like, oh, well, I'm going to be healthy today. No, that requires money, that requires transportation, that requires childcare, that requires not living in a food desert, that requires so many things. And I think that we think healthy is just like, you could do that for free. Being a vegan is very expensive, right? Especially when you live in a food desert. There is no grocery store. So now I have to take 2 buses, carry all those bags, bring it back to my apartment, you know, cook for the kids, cook for me. And then what if my kids don't eat that, right? Like, what if my kids have, genetically their makeup is such that they don't eat certain foods, but I don't know that because I don't have health insurance, right? Like, I think that we assume that people don't want to be healthy, or that people have the capacity to be healthy and are just lazy, right? And that is a word like I just don't subscribe to, because rich people are very lazy, right? But only poor people are vilified for being lazy. And so when you talk about healthy being an actionable item, you ignore all the barriers that lead up to somebody being a healthy version of themselves. You ignore the fact that people, their commute to and from work leaves minimal time for them to even interact with their children, which is a good portion of being healthy, right? Like, their mental stability is based upon a system that does not respect them. And so when you ask, how can, you know, we it was like normalize healthy, or
Yes.
right? Yeah, it was like, how do you normalize healthy? What work are you doing within your organization to make sure that this system ensures that people are healthy? It is, again, it is not the onus of our the people in our society that are left out. It is not their job to do that, right? It is our job, because we are in a financially better place. We are in a socially better place. We are in a place that our 2 steps, right, count for way more than their 2 steps. So if you want to meet people, if you're trying to meet people halfway, that's not going to happen, right? Like, they just cannot meet you. Their 3 steps, right, are like our 1 step, right? Like, and so whenever you try to say that, well, I'm going to do this and I need people to come to me, that's not how it works. And you're leading with ego. Again, a lot of organizations continuously do so. And I think that question, no offense to whoever asked the question, but I think that question is indicative of a mindset that says they need to do something, versus we as a collective, a city, organization, whatever that you're maneuvering under, that we need to do the work to be able to handle those folks in a better way than led them to the place that you do not subscribe to, right? Like, being unhealthy, the place that they are in.
Can you answer that question as if a Black person asked it about themselves? Like, if they were asking for themselves.
Pray.
Okay.
All right.
Sam, Khamil, thank you so much for joining me today. I think that was the perfect ending note. I hope this conversation helped you think about how the world works a little differently and inspired you. I hope everyone has a great day today. I am Jane, and have a great rest of your week, guys.
Thank you.
Bye. So we need the music.
You're right.
We should do the music.
Good. The saxophone player.